and welcome to Beyond the Bio. Stay tuned to learn how body language affects the way that people perceive us and get some hints and tips on how you can make sure that your body language creates the right impressions. This week I am joined by Carole Railton, who is a body language specialist, and we are discussing how our body language can affect the way that people perceive us. Carole started her career working for IBM, and she now works as a global body language consultant, speaker and executive coach with international organisations and business leaders, showing them how to communicate with greater clarity and impact using modern body language behaviours. So let's get stuck in. Welcome to Beyond the Bio, Carole Railton. It's amazing to have you on the show. Obviously, you've got this fantastic interest and experience in body language, but I would love to know what first sparked your interest in body language and how you've then turned that into a career.
It's a really good question, and I think I've got a good answer. So, when my mother was dying, which is a few years ago now, on her deathbed, in fact, 3 days before she died, she told me that I had another half sister. Shock, horror, because I knew nothing about it. And it meant, in a way, that I'd been brought up in lies. So it was really, really difficult. And in that very moment, sitting on her bed in the hospital, I decided I'd never be lied to again. And when I researched that, the easiest way to tell a lie in those days was body language. So that's what I started studying. I was traveling with my job then anyway, so plenty of time at the airport on flights to study. And I just kept studying and studying. So I was able to bring different types of body language together. And in those days, it's a few years ago, you can tell I'm not a teenager. In those days, they didn't distinguish between men and women. And I started to make that divide, and quite significantly. I was still working for big companies like DataPoint, Xerox. I traveled extensively. I'd worked in 47 countries, actually, 9 of those countries for Xerox in the Middle East. So I was still doing that and writing articles on the side for women's books, not realizing at the time that you could earn money for doing body language in companies. I tried to buy a company called DataPoint with a couple of other directors. That fell through, and I just decided to jump ship and do it. And that's how it became about, really.
And how do you then pitch that as a concept to businesses? How do you make the money? How do you make it commercial?
So body language is part of communication, and a very significant part. You know, we use body language before we talk. Everybody says that body language enhances what you say. Yes, it does. But we use our bodies before we speak. So that in itself is useful to people. Because if you can see what people are doing and what they're likely to say and how they're likely to think, and you're in sales, that's really useful. So I'd come out of a sales and management background, and so I could see how it fitted in sales. And I'd done very well in sales because I had all this information. I'd been utilizing it. I don't know if any of my ex-bosses from Xerox are listening, but I only worked 4 days a week because I used to drive down and sail all the weekends in the summer. So I was only working 4 days a week, getting the same number of sales as the other guy, sometimes more. So I knew it was working. It was working for me. So the confidence I had in it was quite extreme, really.
That's so interesting. So this podcast is all about personal branding. How much of our personal brand is shaped by our body language, and how can we make sure that we're sending the right message?
How you ask that is really good because you said shaped. So that is exactly what body language does. It's your image. It's the first thing people see. Let's keep in sales for the moment. You know, if you're going into a company physically and you're in reception and someone picks you up from reception, they see you before you speak. We make our mind up now since COVID, and we can talk about that in a much quicker time. We make our mind up about someone in the first 3 seconds. So when you're in reception, it doesn't matter if it's the secretary or the person that you're meeting, They make their mind up instantly about you. So let's say I see you, like I see you and I like you. Then my next thought, whatever you do, even if you drop your pens on the floor, I would find a reason that was good. I might say, you're human or something like that. And the reverse is true. Obviously, if I didn't like you, and then you drop your pens on the floor. I go, well, I knew she was okay. So that happens within the first 30 seconds. And the first point of observation is in 3 to 5 seconds. So how does it shape you? As soon as you appear, it shapes you, really.
So what are the mistakes that you see in that scenario then? What are people getting wrong?
Well, I think the obvious one is a false smile. Most of us can see that. We see on business photographs and things like that. We see people who are quite serious, like myself. I've not got the smiliest face, trying to be really happy. That's not me. I think the biggest word in body language, certainly in my book, The Future of Body Language, is authentic. You have to be authentic. And it's about enhancing who you are rather than changing who you are. So you probably had your colors done by somebody, so you know what colors are good for you. You need your body language checked as well, so that you're using body language that enhances you. We talk about, I mean, the most common thing is, if you've got your arms folded, that's rejection. No, it's not necessarily rejection. Depends where you are and it depends how you think. Because if you're highly creative, you're likely to have your arms folded and digest ideas. You're actually pushing your ideas down into your stomach area so that you can work them out. And if you think about it, your environment is very important too. We change our behaviors in different environments. So at home, you might have your legs up on the table and a beer or a glass of wine, and your arms folded over your belly. If you did that in an office and a junior came in, or even your boss, you'd be using threatening behavior. So your environment is very, very much part of body language.
That's such a great point. And I'm always really conscious about the arm folding thing because in my corporate days when I worked for John Lewis, they used to talk about that a lot. And I was always like, oh, you mustn't do that. And then they did something that talked about actually it's fine because sometimes I'm just cold. So I got my arms cold. Or the one I remember a lot was yawning, and yawning's, oh, that's so bad, it makes people think you're bored or whatever, you're tired or you're not interested. But actually then they said a year or so later, oh, actually it's really great to yawn because it means you're getting oxygen in and you
Oxygen, your
like,
blood,
which one
yes.
is it, which one is it?
Well, I think things change. I mean, I was the first, I think, to start writing about the changes in behavior with COVID, because we couldn't touch, so we lost that intimacy, couldn't hug people, all those sorts of things. I thought we should actually put our hand on our heart when we met people online, showing that we were open and it was our heart. But it became the elbow, which I never understood who started that, because that never seemed friendly to me. I mean, the expression, you elbow people out the way. So it
Mm.
was back to front to me. I should have been running the government then. But anyway,
Sure, there's plenty of people that would agree with that. So a few thoughts you've prompted there with some of the stuff that you've said, but you were talking around sales just before and the fact that people are making immediate judgments or thoughts based on someone. Have you got any tips around how we can use body language to build that trust and connection more quickly from the start?
yes. The most common thing people say is to mirror body language. Everybody's heard of that. But actually, it's a sort of a myth because people know now when you do it. If I scratch my head and you start scratching my head, I will tune in at some stage. And if the person you're talking to is depressed, you're likely to spiral down, and this is a disaster. Sure, you can get out of it if I show you how, but you probably can't. You're going to end up on the floor. So, a much better way is to first of all look at the energy of the person. Because if, let's give you an example. I'm an extrovert. I mean, how long have you known me? 2 minutes, 5 minutes? I use my arms, I use my body, when I'm training, I love being on stage. I love being on the runways. So other people are not like that. So if I went into a client and just became me, big, powerful, strong voice, I would overpower someone who's introvert. So I think recognizing the amount of energy someone's got is your first stage so that you don't overpower them, so you don't mess it up, really. And once you've done that, there's a couple of clues. Pragmatists, and I'm guessing, I haven't checked it out actually, but I would think you're quite pragmatic.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I read your CV and I thought you'd be kind of bracket, and you're sort of acting that way because it's about pragmatists are quite slick. They know what they want. They say what they want. They negotiate very hard. And that talking at a speed now that they normally talk at. So it's quite fast. Okay. So that's a pragmatist. They'll be smart. They'll have pictures, one picture on their desk, not loads of pictures. They'll be very tidy. They'll be very organized. So you need to be quite direct in your body language and in your language with them and give them what they want. They are the ones, as you know, that you think you've got the deal. And just as you're walking out the door, they go, "Oh, can you give me another 5%?" It's tough to deal with them. So an analytical person who you might find in a university IT department or in IT departments, an analytical person is going to have less exposed body. So they might fold their arms. They might be slightly curved forward. I'm exaggerating. These are very, very subtle signs. And the thing with analyticals is everything is a question. You've met them, you know who they are. They cannot move forward unless they've got detail. So in your body language, you're going to have to use open body language to open them up, but very gently, and ask them questions. You need them to be answering questions, not asking you. Then you've got extroverts, woo, insurance salesmen, life and death, that sort of thing. They've got energy. You need to display energy and you need to make movements. And what you can do, and what I do, instead of using physical movements with people, I use the breath. The breath is the life source. Without breath for 3 minutes, you're dead. So if you can get into the breath pattern of the other person you're talking to, they will connect to you without realizing why. And they feel comfortable because actually, whatever way you want to describe it, you're sort of in their body without them realizing. It's not as easy as just mimicking. You need to practice, you need to listen to pauses and that sort of thing. I have a pub quiz team, right? And they heard me say that on the phone the other week and they said, "What do you mean?" So now, before we start the quiz, I have to do sessions with them about breathing. So it's quite funny. But it's so
Does it help you
important.
win?
Yeah, well, we do quite well. We've never won. There's 19 teams, but we've only come third is the best we've done. We will win one day. So it is really important because there's one of the guys in the team. He's said that he's got deals. I mean, he's in insurance, high up in insurance, he's an insurance broker. And he's starting to understand what he's doing and how it's affecting him. So what I'm saying is mimicking is sort of the last resort. Copying the breath is a really good way to get the person opposite you in tune with you. And our breath changes like when we're very excited, we talk very quickly, take short breaths. When we're very relaxed on holiday, it's all slow. So we know that breath is vital and it's expressed naturally when things happen to us. I'm asking you to give your expression to breath to the other person at that time, actually copy them.
God, there's just so much involved when you think about it, isn't there? No wonder you have to become an expert in these things. Are there any specific cues that we should watch out for when we're assessing whether someone's engaged or interested, or to be able to pick up if they're holding something back?
our body is divided into all different sections, and our face is divided into three as well. We're doing face reading. And the body, it's generally agreed that the right side is for giving out. I mean, in Europe, we shake hands with the right hand. We give out the right hand to offer innocence and freedom and that sort of thing. So we tend to receive on the left. All right. And what people do generally, if people are quite secretive, they'll cover up their left side. Now, they are, again, I'm exaggerating. So they might lean their head over to the left. They might lean it over to the left there. Or they might just cover it. They might have their head turning to the left. And these are people who are not openly open. That's what I'll say. So if you're running a training course and someone actually leans to the right, it means they're open to learning, you know? So it can mean the same in a meeting. You know, they're actually listening, they're digesting it. Okay? So that would be a good clue. And we've all seen the guys who are generally guys who lean back and wiggle their feet, don't they? And their arms wiggle a bit, they wiggle their feet. In general, they're accepting what you're saying, but it doesn't mean they're going to put it in action because they're going, okay, I hear you, you know, you look great or whatever it is, but I'm not sure I'm going to do this. So that can be a clue, but you tend to need to know them before you make that judgment. And I think that probably the eyes are quite important. And to me, this is what got my head above the block. In the old days, I used to say this triangle, upside down triangle, when you meet someone, look at their face, you know, look at their eyes and look at their nose. I say no. And this is why I say no. I've already said that the left side of your body is the receiving side. So I want people to look into the left eye of the person they're talking to. Have the breath pattern or not. You might not be up to the speed with the breath pattern. But if you use the left eye, you again make a connection with them. The only time I think you should use both eyes, if it's a command position, say you're on a boat and it looks like it's going to tip over, you might need people to do something straight away. And you would look in both their eyes and say, do this or whatever. So look into the left eye. Once they connect and they start looking into your left eye only, I guarantee, and you can phone me any time of the night, a day, to tell me when it's worked for you. You'll find that you're talking to someone and they're looking in your left eye. You'll have more influence, more power. They'll feel great. Again, they won't know why, but they'll feel more relaxed because you're not commanding them. You know, it's a more relaxed interpretation of negotiation.
I'm going to totally try that. Does it work on
Good.
kids? Does it work in dating?
Oh, I've done a lot of work with children when I was practicing. There's one thing, if you're going to try that left eye thing, you need to have both feet on the ground. It won't work if you've got one foot in the air, one foot round a table or a chair or something like that. You have to have both feet flat on the
Why is
ground.
that?
Grounded. You've got to be grounded.
I see. Okay.
You know, it's the same as giving a presentation. You know, you can walk up and down, which is quite disturbing unless you're Anthony Robbins. I mean, I reviewed for Inc. publications the top 10 TED speakers, and there were only 3 that actually had the criteria for good presenters. It was really interesting. And Tony Robbins breaks all the rules. He takes people on stage, he elaborates, he interrupts people. It's fascinating when you look at it. So, yeah, that works if you've got both feet on the ground and you look into their left eye.
I'm totally going to try this out later.
Well, let me know. Let me know.
I will. You've touched on this slightly already around sort of online world, but in a world where so much now does happen virtually, how can we still convey strong, positive body language on things like Zoom calls and presentations?
It's tough. It's tough. We mustn't deny that. And let's look at why it's tough, because when we're in an office with someone, we can look away from them. We can look at the pictures on the wall, we can look at their pen, or we can look at the suit they're wearing, or whatever it is. We deflect quite a lot. But you and I don't know how long we've been on here, but we haven't really taken our eyes off each other. It's one of those things we have to concentrate, and we concentrate on this very small area, which is the face. So we can't read any of the body language below. We don't know what your feet are doing. And your feet are the most honest part of your body. So I do some work for a stockbroker, and I go to the general meeting, when the CEOs deliver what they're going to do next year and they tell you how much profit they've made that year. So I go, and what I do is I'm looking at whether they're telling the truth. And I will only validate what I'm saying if I can see their feet. So sometimes I can't see their feet. So I will do the report and say, I can't validate it. This is just what I saw. And I get 2 payments with that, because I get payment when I do it. And if I'm right at the end of the year, I get another payment. So I like that gig.
Love it. Love it. Gosh, there's so many things that I could ask you about. There's so much more to this topic, I think, than I'd realised. So it's so interesting. My final question, I would love to know, what is one simple body language adjustment that anyone could make today that is going to boost their confidence and therefore their presence?
Okay, I think there are 2 things, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
One is to stand in an X shape. So your legs are apart and your arms are in the air. It's a sort of thing to do in the toilet before you go for
I was going to say, you might look a bit weird in a meeting doing that
Don't
one.
do it in reception. So this is the sort of thing you do before you go for an interview or before you go on TV or something like that. And the ideal time to do it is for 3 minutes. And why that works, it's actually affecting the hormones in your spine, and it will increase your testosterone. That's what actually happens. And that's a fighting, gallant sort of, well, really. The other thing, which I'm sort of known for, really, if you're nervous about any situation, going into a client, going on stage, going on screen, what you can do is to walk wherever you're going and imagine that you've got a crown on your head, a very heavily jeweled crown. And what that does, well, you can try it. Just sit up. Well, I'm telling you to sit up. Just put the crown on your head and see what happens. You have to sit up to balance the crown. Yeah. And it makes you regal. I mean, women, this is important to say. Women make more movements than men. And when we get to the top, we're not even seen as being at the top because we make more movements. And this is a way of making women regal. So I don't stop them making those moves. I talked to you at the very beginning about enhancing who you are. So I want them to make those moves regally so that they're noticed. So deeper breaths and more royal and very controlled.
I love that, because when I think of the word regal, I can completely picture exactly what you've described. So that's brilliant. Amazing. Gosh, I feel like I've learned lots of things that I want to go and practice now and see how I get on. If anyone listening hasn't come across you before, where's the best place for them to find you?
A website, Carole Railton.com is the website. They can find me on, well, everywhere really. On X, I'm at Carole Railton. I think you just hit Google, you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll pop a couple of links into the website, to your book, and to the socials as well, to make it super easy for people. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you're serious about growing your profile, take our free profile assessment quiz to see where you're at right now and get hints and tips on how to improve your score. You'll find the link to the quiz in the show notes. If you've enjoyed the episode, it would be mint if you'd subscribe, like, and leave a review. See you next Monday.